What if I told you Miriam Rodriguez was the real-life John Wick? After her daughter was kidnapped and murdered by the cartel, Shorty took matters into her own hands. She had a particular set of skills. Stupido. She studied her suspects' habits and tracked them down one by one until justice was served. She put the DEA on her back, though. When a suspect was detained but refused to snitch, she turned on the motherly charm to get him to flip. 5-0 couldn't get the job done, so Shorty made him rat by 6'9". She learned an old friend of her daughter's was entangled with a key cartel member behind bars. Confirming her daughter's ransom calls had been made from her phone, and she wouldn't let that slide. The Mexican work ethic is undefeated. She tracked down an op's grandmother who spilled the tea. He was arrested at a nearby church. My son had more sources than whoa. She got a tip one of her daughter's kidnappers was near the Texas border. When she pulled up on him, he sprinted away in fear, because Shorty was Ray Lewis to the bullshit. Tell me how a stone-cold killer got pile-drived by a 54-year-old mother on a mission. She was shot dead outside of her home in 2016, on Mother's Day. But the GOAT's legacy is eternal. If you didn't know Miriam Rodriguez had that perro in her, tell me a follow. And if not, it's just despicable.
Hollywood, what the hell? How is this not a movie? Miriam Rodriguez goes down and hunts down her daughter's kidnappers in Mexico. This is far greater than any other story that y'all have had all of 2020. Now, Taken was a good movie too, but this is the real life one. You can have my $10 now if this movie ever gets made, and I'm buying the movie when it comes out on digital. If I was a producer and I had the money to bankroll it, I'd pay to make this movie right now. I'm so interested in the background of this.
This woman dedicated her life to finding her daughter's murderers until she was eventually murdered herself. Miriam Rodriguez was understandably obsessed with getting justice for her murdered 20-year-old daughter Karen. Karen had been kidnapped and killed by the cartel in 2014. Miriam knew she couldn't rest until she held those accountable responsible. On January the 23rd, 2014, Karen was driving her car through San Fernando when two trucks pulled up alongside her. Shockingly, then armed men broke into her vehicle and kidnapped her. For the next few weeks, Karen's friends and family desperately tried to get her home with no luck. Now, it was known that the cartel would kidnap innocent people in order to get financial gain and hold them for ransom. Unfortunately, Karen was their latest victim. Now, Karen's family followed all of the cartel's instructions and took out huge bank loans, but still never got Karen back. Miriam eventually asked to meet a cartel member who had promised to help her get Karen back for a fee of $2,000. Unfortunately, this led nowhere, but Miriam now had a clue in the case: the name of the man she met up with. After she found him on Facebook, she found clues to where he worked and spent hours lurking outside to follow him home. She dyed her hair red as part of a disguise, and a policeman finally agreed to assist her. She had heaps of information that she handed over to police. They eventually were able to arrest this man, and he handed over some names of the cartel members. One even agreed to take her to the place where Karen was killed. Here they tragically found one of Karen's bones. Miriam eventually hunted down 10 cartel members responsible for Karen's killing. She actually had a superpower. She didn't care if they killed her. Miriam said, "I died the day they killed my daughter. I want to end this. I'm going to take out the people who hurt my daughter, and they can do whatever they want to me." In 2017, 29 inmates dug a tunnel and escaped from the prison where Karen's abductors were. Tragically, on Mother's Day, escaped inmates pulled up to Miriam's house. The 57-year-old was shot and killed. 2 of her killers were arrested and 1 was killed in a gunfight. Tragically, Karen was just one of tens of thousands of innocent people who were abducted by the cartel. Miriam Rodriguez will always be their hero.
This is Miriam Elizabeth Rodriguez Martinez. On January 23, 2014, her youngest daughter Karen was kidnapped by the cartel. Miriam and her family did what they were told. They paid the ransom, they followed instructions, but still, Karen did not turn up. After several ransom payments and even a meeting with a local cartel member, she started gathering information on all local cartel members that she could. Then she cut her hair very short and she dyed it bright red, and she got to work. She disguised herself as a government employee. She went house to house, got information that she needed. She stalked members' houses. At one point, she even found a former cartel member at the border where he was selling sunglasses. He saw her approaching and then he ran because he recognized her. And she ran after him, tackled him, and held him at gunpoint until the police arrived. Her pursuit of justice led to the arrest of 10 cartel members that had participated in her daughter's abduction. Tragically, her search for justice and bravery cost her her life. She was targeted for her activism. On Mother's Day 2017, she was getting ready to go back inside her house after celebrating and parking her truck. A white Nissan truck pulled up next to her and fired. She was found with her hand reaching for her gun. She died on her way to the hospital. Eventually, a pair of 18 and 19-year-old men were arrested for her murder, but her family believes that the real killers are still out there. They're still waiting for justice.
A mother's love is truly unmatched, and in this story you'll see just how far this mother was willing to go for her daughter. Now, the blonde woman on the left was named Miriam Rodriguez, and in 2014 she was only 20 years old and she was living in Mexico with her parents. On January 23rd of 2014, she was driving her car when two other cars pulled up beside her. A bunch of men emerged out of these cars and essentially kidnapped her. And those men happened to be part of the cartel group known as the Zetas, which have quite a large territory in Mexico along the Gulf Coast. It became very obvious that Karen was taken in order to get money for ransom. And obviously her mother and her entire family followed every single instruction in order to get Karen back alive. They even took out quite a large loan in order to pay for her ransom. When it came time to drop off the money, they did so, but Karen never came back. Now, her mother Miriam was completely devastated by all this. And as a last resort, she decided to reach out to the cartel and ask them to meet with her one-on-one. And surprisingly, one of them agreed to meet with her. Now, the guy that Miriam met with was named Sama, and although he said that he didn't know where her daughter was, he said that he would offer to help her in exchange for $2,000. Miriam did end up paying him, but of course this went absolutely nowhere. But she was not about to let that stop her. She had one very important clue that helped her get started, and that was the name of one of these members. Using his name, she then started looking for him on Facebook, where she eventually found him. And from there, she did a huge deep dive into his life and who he was friends with. She even went to his neighborhood and disguised herself in many different outfits and even dyed her hair different colors in order to not be seen. She also went around knocking door to door in his neighborhood in order to get as much information as possible. Now, the authorities thought that she was absolutely crazy and that doing this investigation on her own wasn't going to go anywhere. But when one member of the police force did agree to meet with her, they were absolutely stunned by the amount of information she was able to gather all by herself, which ended up paying off because police were able to track down Sama and they arrested him. And they were also able to arrest multiple other cartel members. But this also came with some very devastating news. One of the cartel members offered to take police and Miriam to the ranch where her daughter had been killed. At the ranch, they did end up finding multiple pieces of bones that belonged to Karen. And by the end of it, Miriam's assistance was able to help track down 10 members of the cartel. And although she was able to gain some justice for her daughter, it did not go unnoticed by the cartel. Instead, Miriam herself became their next target. In March of 2017, there was a prison break where many of the cartel members that Miriam helped incarcerate had just broken out. Being afraid for her life, Miriam asked for police protection, which they agreed to. But unfortunately, it was just not enough because 2 months later, tragedy struck again. Of all days, this just had to happen on Mother's Day in Mexico, which was May 10th. Miriam was walking up the front steps towards her house when a white Nissan pulled up in front of her home, and it was filled with multiple inmates that had recently escaped from the prison. They then proceeded to shoot her about a dozen times, and sadly, Miriam passed away on her driveway, where she was later found by her husband. And even though authorities were able to arrest 2 of the 3 men responsible for taking her life, it was a far cry from justice. But it just goes to show you how far a mother is willing to go for their own children, and they're willing to risk absolutely everything, including their lives.
I was brutally unalived after hunting down over 10 cartel members for the murder of my daughter. My name is Miriam Rodriguez. On January 23, 2012, in the city of San Fernando in Tamaulipas, my daughter was driving her truck when suddenly 2 trucks blocked her in. 2 armed men then came out and forced their way into my daughter's truck and dragged her into theirs. Shortly after, a family friend ended up witnessing the scene and was abducted as well. My family began receiving threats and ransom demands. They then demanded thousands of dollars in ransom payments in exchange for her. Feeling scared for my daughter's life, I had no choice but to take out a loan from the bank. Ransoms were so common in the city that the bank was giving out ransom loans. I was then told to drop off the ransom at a local medical facility. I waited and nobody showed up. Starting to feel even more nervous, I demanded to meet with one of the captors and they agreed. I eventually met up with one of them at a local restaurant. Instead of giving me my daughter, he demanded even more money without telling me where she was. I was then asked for an extra $2,500. I would have given everything I had to have my daughter back with me, so I paid the extra money. After a while of waiting, I realized my daughter wouldn't be returning. I opened up a police report, but nothing was done. They didn't even attempt to look for my daughter because of their corruption and involvement with the cartel. I vowed to find every single one of my daughter's kidnappers. The family friend who was also kidnapped was let go shortly after because he offered no value to them. I then pressed him for the physical appearance of the captors, and he eventually gave in. It confirmed the man I had met up with at the restaurant, whose name was Sama, was involved in my capture of my daughter. I spent hours and hours looking for any clues. I eventually came across a picture of Sama with a girl at an ice cream shop. I spent the next few days stalking the ice cream shop. I had recognized the woman in the picture with Sama, so I studied her work hours and waited patiently for Sama to show up. He eventually did, and I waited to follow the couple home and get their address. I needed to get closer to them, so I went undercover. I cut and dyed my hair red and put on an old government uniform, and I went door to door in Sama's neighborhood conducting fake surveys. Doing even more research, I was able to locate a picture of Sama's crew. On September 15, 2014, my son was closing his shop when he noticed a familiar face. It was Sama. He immediately called me, and Sama was then arrested, and he quickly gave the names of my daughter's captors. That's when I found out my daughter was murdered and buried in an abandoned ranch. Feeling overwhelmed with emotions, I knew I had to take justice into my own hands, so I kept searching for my daughter's captors. I managed to track another member named Flores back to his hometown, and found out he attended church. I began stalking him for more information, and then I contacted the authorities and had him arrested. I wasn't done yet, though. I located another man who was a vendor near the Mexican-United States border. He immediately recognized me and ran away. I got a hold of him and pinned him to the ground until the police arrived. Cartels then found out what I was doing, and I began to be threatened. On May 17, 2017, I was leaving my home when I was riddled with bullets. I passed away instantly. Some of the captors managed to escape from prison and took my life shortly after. I took on an entire cartel by myself for my daughter. Now you know that.